My name is Sharon Foster, and looking back, I should have known better than to trust the warmth in my brother's invitation. The drive from Vermont to Riverside, Connecticut had stretched into 4 long hours, the kind that give you too much time to think and not quite enough warning for what's waiting at the end. Maverick kept the radio tuned to classic rock, humming along under his breath, fingers tapping lightly against the steering wheel in easy rhythm. In the backseat, Willa sat cross-legged with her nose buried deep in a dog-eared copy of Anne of Green Gables, turning pages carefully as if the story might bruise. Jude, meanwhile, leaned forward between the seats every half hour to ask if we were close, his excitement about seeing Uncle Reed fizzing over like a shaken soda can ready to burst. Maverick had dressed the way he always did, understated, deliberate, comfortable. A soft chambray shirt from LL Bean, well-worn khakis molded perfectly to him, and the brown leather loafers he'd resoled twice because, as he liked to say, they were finally broken in properly. His salt and pepper hair was slightly mussed from the long drive, and he wore that relaxed smile of a man who didn't need external validation to feel secure. I had chosen a cream silk blouse and navy slacks, simple but elegant, with my grandmother's pearl earrings resting lightly against my neck. Willa wore a vintage Ralph Lauren dress I'd found at an estate sale, blush pink with delicate embroidery stitched so finely it spoke of a different era. Jude had insisted on his favorite polo and neatly pressed khakis, looking like he'd stepped out of a catalog, though the crease down the front had already surrendered to the car ride. We pulled up the long, winding driveway just after 7 in the evening. The mansion rose ahead of us like something conjured from a glossy magazine spread, white columns gleaming beneath the fading daylight, chandeliers blazing behind towering windows, lawns trimmed so precisely they looked painted. Luxury vehicles lined the circular drive, Mercedes, BMWs, a Bentley that likely cost more than our entire neighborhood combined. "Wow," Jude whispered, pressing his forehead to the window. "Uncle Reed lives here?" "He rents here," I corrected gently, though unease had already begun coiling in my stomach. Maverick remained quiet, but I caught the faint narrowing of his eyes as he surveyed the property. To strangers, that look meant creative observation, the quiet note-taking of a freelance nature writer gathering impressions. But I knew better. Maverick was always assessing, always filing information away in a mental ledger no one else knew existed. We parked our dependable 8-year-old Volvo wagon between a Tesla and a Jaguar. It looked almost apologetic in comparison. The party spilled across the terrace and into the manicured lawn. Women in designer gowns floated past in clouds of perfume, their heels clicking confidently against the stone. Men stood in tailored suits, sharp enough to draw blood. Champagne glasses glinted under strands of warm lighting. The air carried the scent of wealth, that strange blend of exclusivity and privilege that made outsiders feel like they'd wandered into a private club without a membership. We climbed the steps together. Willa slipped her hand into mine, her palm damp. At 9, she already understood what it meant to feel slightly out of place, even if she didn't have words for it. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," I murmured. She squeezed my fingers in reply. A young woman with a clipboard intercepted us at the entrance. Her smile was polished but empty. "Names?" "Sharon Foster. This is my husband, Maverick Miller, and our children." She scanned her list, her expression shifting almost imperceptibly. "Ah, yes, the Vermont family. Right this way." Maverick's hand settled at the small of my back as we followed her. We passed the VIP section, a raised portion of the terrace with the perfect vantage point. Clustered cocktail tables draped in ivory linen, champagne constantly refreshed. That's where I saw Reed, animated and glowing, surrounded by impeccably dressed guests. I lifted a hand slightly, ready to greet him, but his eyes flickered toward us only briefly. Something flashed across his face. Embarrassment. He didn't approach. The coordinator continued walking, past the prime seating, past the secondary tables, until we reached a round table tucked near the kitchen entrance, where servers moved briskly in and out, and the music dulled against the wall. The lighting was harsher here, less forgiving. "Enjoy the party," she said, already pivoting away. Maverick pulled out my chair calmly, helped Willa sit, then Jude. When he finally lowered himself into his own seat, his expression remained neutral, but his jaw tightened just enough for me to notice. "Mom, why are we by the kitchen?" Willa asked softly. "It's fine, honey. We can see everything from here," I replied, though we both knew that wasn't true. Across the terrace, Reed lifted his glass in a toast, laughter erupting around him. He didn't look at us again. Maverick leaned back, fingers tapping lightly against the tablecloth, once, twice. To anyone else, he appeared relaxed. I knew that look too well. He was cataloging. The evening unfolded around us like a carefully orchestrated machine. Waiters drifted past with trays angled toward the VIP cluster. Laughter floated in golden waves beneath the string lights. Our corner received fluorescent spillover and little else. Helen approached eventually, her champagne-colored gown catching every beam of light. She was beautiful in a meticulously curated way, each detail refined, each accessory deliberate. Her smile settled onto her face like a permanent fixture. "Sharon, I'm so glad you made the trip from Vermont. That must have been quite the drive." 4 hours, I replied evenly. "I can't imagine living so far from civilization," she laughed lightly. "But I suppose that's the artistic life. Reed mentioned you work for a nonprofit. How fulfilling." The word landed heavy with condescension. Maverick's thumb brushed my knuckles beneath the table. "Let her talk." "It is fulfilling," I said. Her gaze moved to Willa. "What a sweet vintage dress. Very quaint." Willa smiled dim slightly. "It's Ralph Lauren, 80s collection," I replied calmly. "Excellent craftsmanship." Of course, vintage can be charming, though people here do prefer current runway pieces. Still, making do shows resourcefulness. Making do. As if thrift were desperation rather than choice. Helen soon returned with a small cluster of guests, presenting us as if unveiling an exhibit. "This is Sharon, Reed's sister. She lives in Vermont to find artistic inspiration and works for a nonprofit. Very chill lifestyle, though quite removed from our fast-paced world." Polite smiles, disinterested eyes. "Actually," Maverick said mildly, "Sharon oversees complex initiatives involving multiple stakeholders and 7-figure budgets. Pace isn't exclusive to profit-driven sectors." His tone remained gentle. The steel underneath went unnoticed by most. Helen's smile sharpened slightly. "Of course. Though the salary difference must be significant. Passion requires sacrifice." She drifted away again. Jude tugged my sleeve. "Mom, can I try those little snacks?" He had barely risen when Helen reappeared, crouching gracefully. "Oh, sweetheart, those are foie gras and caviar. Exquisite tastes. Without proper palate training, they might be difficult. I'll have the kitchen prepare something more familiar. Spaghetti, perhaps? Fried chicken?" The implication hung thick in the air. Jude frowned slightly. "But I like trying new things." "No need, Helen." I stood, placing a steady hand on Jude's shoulder. "Our children will dine with us. They're taught to explore, not to be separated." Helen's composure cracked for a flicker of a second. "I was only helping." "We don't require help, thank you." She straightened, gaze flickering toward Maverick, perhaps expecting contradiction. He merely smiled, that unreadable, easy smile.
"Suit yourself. I wouldn't want them uncomfortable." She walked away, perfume lingering behind. Silence settled at our table. Maverick leaned toward Jude. "The best food is whatever you enjoy most. Doesn't matter if it's caviar or chicken fingers. If you like it, that's what counts. And between us, I'd take a burger over fish eggs any day." Jude laughed softly. But Maverick's eyes tracked Helen across the terrace, his expression cooling by degrees. He was patient, thoughtful, slow to anger, and fiercely protective. I had a feeling Helen had no idea what she'd just set in motion. The party had reached its crescendo by 10 minutes to 8, but at our table I was halfway through explaining to Jude why he couldn't have a third canopy when I noticed Willa's empty chair. My daughter had excused herself to the restroom 10 minutes ago. The knot in my stomach tightens. I stand, scanning the crowd for her blonde head, her vintage Ralph Lauren cardigan, the one I'd found at an estate sale, pristine condition, better quality than anything in Helen's closet. Then I see her. Willa is walking back toward our dark corner, but something's wrong. Her shoulders are hunched forward, her arms wrapped around herself like she's trying to disappear. Even from here, I can see the redness around her eyes, the way she's blinking too fast. She slides into her chair without looking at me. "Willa?" I lean closer, keeping my voice low. "Honey, what happened?" She shakes her head, her jaw clenched tight. That's when I know it's bad. Willa doesn't cry easily. She's too much like me, holding everything in until it cracks. "Sweetheart, talk to me." Her voice comes out strangled, barely above a whisper. "Can we just go home?" My heart breaks. "What happened?" "Some kids." She swallows hard. "There were these girls by the bathroom. They were maybe 12 or 13, and they pointed at my shoes." I look down at her feet. The suede flats, soft taupe, classic silhouette, worn but well-maintained. I'd bought them at a vintage boutique in Vermont because they were real quality, the kind that lasts, they said. Willa's voice cracks. "They said I was wearing poor person shoes. They asked if we got them from a donation bin because they looked so old." The rage that floods through me is white-hot and instantaneous. My 9-year-old daughter, my sensitive, brilliant girl who reads 3 grades above her level and volunteers at the animal shelter every weekend, mocked for shoes.
I reach for her hand, but before I can say anything, I hear the click of heels on marble. Helen materializes at our table like a shark scenting blood. "Oh dear, is everything all right?" Her voice drips with false concern, pitched just loud enough to draw attention from nearby tables. Several guests turn to look, champagne flutes pausing mid-sip. "We're fine," I say flatly. "Are you sure? Because Willa looks upset." Helen tilts her head, her expression a practiced mask of sympathy. "Did something happen?" I open my mouth, but Willa speaks first, her voice small. "Some girls made fun of my shoes." Helen's eyes flick down to Willa's suede slats, and I see it, that microsecond of satisfaction before she arranges her face into understanding. "Oh, sweetheart." She crouches down, putting herself at Willa's eye level in a performance of compassion. "You know, children here are raised differently. Their parents are business leaders, philanthropists. These kids are being groomed for Yale, for Harvard. They have very refined standards." My fingers curl into fists under the table. Helen continues, her voice taking on a teacherly tone. "Honestly, Sharon, I've been worried about this. The children, they're not used to being in environments like this. Living so isolated up in Vermont without regular exposure to proper social settings." She sighs, shaking her head. "It causes culture shock. They don't understand the expectations." The words hang in the air like poison. She's not defending Willa, she's defending the bullies. "Maybe next time," Helen says, standing and smoothing her dress, "you could prepare them better? Make sure their clothing is more appropriate for the occasion? It would save everyone the awkwardness." The crowd is watching now. I can feel their eyes on us, on my children, judging. Helen's implication is crystal clear. "This is your fault, Sharon. You brought your backwoods children to a place they don't belong, dressed them like charity cases, and now everyone's uncomfortable." I'm shaking. I want to scream, to tell her exactly what I think of her and her refined standards, to drag her outside. But I'm frozen, because Reed is here, somewhere in this crowd, and he's my brother, my only sibling. If I make a scene, if I cause chaos at his engagement party, I'll be the villain in this story. I stand abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. Helen's smile widens, victorious. She thinks she's won. Then Maverick stands. The change in him is immediate and terrifying. Gone is the gentle, soft-spoken man who spent dinner quietly eating pasta. The air around him seems to drop 10 degrees. He stands to his full height, moving with the kind of controlled precision that makes people instinctively step back. He doesn't say a word. He simply stands there, one hand adjusting the button of his suit jacket that fits him like it was painted on, and the silence spreads outward like ripples in water. Conversations die, mid-sentence. Glasses stop clinking. Maverick doesn't look at Helen. He looks at me. His blue eyes are calm, cold, and completely focused. There's a question in them, one we've asked each other 1,000 times in our 17 years together. Have you had enough? It's the same look he gave me the day I told him about the harassment at my old job. The same look before he quietly made a phone call that resulted in my former boss being audited by the IRS. Maverick doesn't make threats. He doesn't need to. I think about Willa's red eyes, about Jude's confusion when he couldn't have a burger, about being shoved into a dark corner while Helen parades around in a dress that cost more than our monthly grocery bill. I think about my brother, who I drove 4 hours to celebrate, who hasn't once come to check on us. I look at Maverick and nod. The decision is made. Helen's smile falters as she realizes something has shifted. She takes a small step back, her eyes darting between us, suddenly uncertain. Maverick's expression doesn't change. He reaches down, helping Willa out of her chair with infinite gentleness, then does for Jude. "We're leaving," I say, my voice steady now. And in that moment, with my husband's silent strength at my back and my children's hands in mine, I choose their dignity over my brother's party. I choose us. Several nearby conversations paused. I can feel the attention shifting toward us, the whispers starting. Helen's uncertainty evaporates instantly, replaced by barely concealed triumph. She straightens, that megawatt smile returning full force. "You know what? I think that's probably the smartest decision you could make right now." Her voice carries, projecting to the growing audience of guests, pretending not to stare. "This is my house, after all, mine and Reed's. I have to maintain a certain image for our business partners, our investors." She emphasizes those last words, letting them land like stones. "My house, my house, my house." The claim hangs in the air, territorial and absolute. She's not dismissing us, she's evicting us from her domain, like we're trespassers who've overstayed our welcome. I'm gathering Willa's small purse when I catch it. A flicker of something Maverick's face, not anger, not indignation. A smirk. It's gone in an instant, so quick I almost think I imagined it, but I know my husband. I've seen that expression exactly 3 times in our marriage. Once before he negotiated a hostile takeover. Once before he systematically dismantled a competitor who tried to poach his entire executive team. And once before he outbid a Russian oligarch for a property in Manhattan just to prove a point.
It's the look of a man who's been handed exactly what he wanted. "Sharon? Sharon?" Reed's voice cuts through the murmur of the crowd. He's pushing through the guests, his face flushed and confused, his tie slightly askew. He looks tired, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that comes from trying to keep up appearances all night. What's going on? He reaches our table, eyes darting between me and Helen. Why are you guys leaving already? Helen immediately shifts gears, her hand flying to her chest in a gesture of wounded innocence. Oh, Reed, honey, it's not… Sharon said she wanted to leave. I think she's just not comfortable here. The vibe isn't really… She trails off delicately, letting him fill in the blanks. The implication is clear. Your sister doesn't fit in with our crowd. Reed's face crumples with guilt and confusion. Sharon, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for you to feel… He runs a hand through his hair, making it stand up in stressed peaks. Maybe you should take the kids back to the hotel, let them rest. You must be tired from the drive, and… He's apologizing to me for Helen's behavior, and he has no idea. My brother, standing in this mansion's grand foyer, surrounded by crystal and marble and imported flowers, actually believes he lives here, believes this is his home, his party, his life. He has no clue that every piece of furniture he's lounging on, every room he's hosting in, every inch of this partnership with Helen exists because Maverick decided to be generous 3 years ago. Reed thinks he's the host, the master of the house. In reality, he's a tenant whose lease is about to expire. It's fine, Reed, I say quietly, slipping my arm around Willa's shoulders. We'll get out of your way. No, it's not, he's flustered now, aware that people are watching, that this doesn't look good. You came all this way, I wanted you to be here. Reed, sweetheart. Helen touches his arm, her voice honey-sweet. Let them go. Sharon clearly wants to leave, and we have guests to attend to. The Castellanos were asking about the investment timeline, and… She's steering him away, redirecting his attention like she always does. Reed's shoulders sag in defeat. He shoots me one more apologetic look before allowing himself to be led back toward the center of the party, toward the lights and the laughter and the people who matter in Helen's world. Maverick is silent beside me, helping Jude into his jacket with methodical care. But I see it again, that tiny quirk at the corner of his mouth when Helen said, "My house." Maverick? I murmur as we start toward the door. Not yet, he says softly. His voice is calm, almost pleasant, but there's something underneath it, something that makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. We're almost to the foyer when Helen's voice rings out behind us, bright and performative. Drive safely, and Sharon, maybe next time, let us know if you need recommendations for the children's clothing. I know some wonderful boutiques that aren't too expensive. The laughter that follows is polite but present. Several guests are openly watching now, champagne flutes in hand, entertained by the drama. Willa's hand tightens in mine. Maverick stops walking. He doesn't turn around, doesn't react visibly, but something shifts in the air, a change in pressure, like right before a thunderstorm breaks. He reaches into his jacket pocket and pulls out his phone. The motion is casual, unhurried. He taps the screen a few times, scrolling through something. Actually, he says, his voice carrying effortlessly across the marble foyer. Before we go, there's something I need to discuss with Reed. The room goes quiet. Helen's smile freezes. I'm sorry, what? Maverick finally turns, and the look on his face is pleasant, professional, the expression of someone about to discuss a minor contract detail. Reed? He calls out. Could you come here for a moment? It's about the house. My brother emerges from the crowd again, now looking completely bewildered. The house? What about… The lease, Maverick says simply. I wanted to give you proper notice in person, since we're all here. Reed blinks. Notice? What notice? And just like that, the trap springs shut. The party noise seemed to fade into a dull hum as Maverick stepped forward. There was something different about him now. The quiet, amiable writer had vanished, replaced by someone who moved with the confidence of a man who'd spent decades in boardrooms where millions changed hands with a signature. Reed? Maverick said, his voice low but carrying an authority that made several nearby guests turn their heads. Do you remember the name of the parent company on the lease you signed? My brother blinked, confusion replacing the embarrassment that had been written across his face moments before. What? Why would that right now? Just answer the question, Maverick said, his tone patient but unyielding. Reed's forehead creased as he searched his memory. I think it's Ironwood Holdings. I honestly don't remember the details. I just signed through the agent 3 years ago. Is there a problem with the property management or something? The corner of Maverick's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close.
He pulled out his phone with deliberate slowness, scrolled for a moment, then turned the screen toward Reed. "Read it." Out loud. Reed leaned forward, squinting at the illuminated text. His lips moved silently at first. Then his voice emerged, shaky and confused. "Internal directive, dated April 2020, from V. Miller, Chairman. Subject: Foster account exception." He paused, his face going pale. "Approve exception for Reed Foster's residential file. Freeze 2020 rental rates indefinitely, regardless of market adjustments. Any difference between frozen rate and current market value is to be accounted for in the Chairman's Family Charity Adjustment Account." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the string quartet seemed to sense something monumental happening and let their music trail off, plunging the terrace into a deadly stillness. "I don't," Reed's voice cracked. "What does this mean?" Helen had gone utterly still beside him, her champagne flute frozen halfway to her lips. I watched as understanding began to dawn on her face, slowly at first, then all at once, like watching ice crack across a frozen pond. "It means," Maverick said, his voice carrying clearly across the suddenly quiet gathering, "that the luxurious lifestyle you've been enjoying for the past 3 years has been subsidized. Heavily subsidized. The market rate for this property is currently $4,200 per month. You've been paying $2,800, the frozen 2020 rate. That's a difference of $16,800 per year. Over 3 years, that's $50,400 in effective charity." Reed staggered backward as if he'd been physically struck. No, that's not. I can afford this place. I make good money." "You make a good salary," Maverick corrected gently. "But you're not rich, Reed. You're what financial advisors call a Henry. High earner, not rich yet. You spend everything you make trying to maintain an image that's beyond your actual means. Without the subsidy, you couldn't afford this address. You certainly couldn't afford it while also funding those European vacations and luxury Carleys and the country club membership Helen insisted on." I watched my brother's face crumple, watched him realize that every dismissive comment Helen had made about people who don't understand quality, every sneering remark about knowing your place in the world, all of it had been built on a diabolical foundation of charity. Charity from the man she'd been mocking all evening. Maverick turned to Helen, whose face had transformed from its usual haughty composure into something raw and exposed. "You're right about one thing, Helen. Class cannot be faked. Real class isn't about designer labels or knowing which fork to use or making sure everyone sees your expensive watch. Real class is about character, about how you treat people when you think they can't do anything for you." He paused, letting his words sink in. Around us, the gathered guests stood transfixed, their cocktails forgotten.
The class you've been so proud of for 3 years, this address, this lifestyle, this social standing, it's been funded by my family's charity. Every time you look down on someone for wearing LL Bean instead of Louis Vuitton, every time you judge someone's worth by their clothes or their car, you were doing it from a position you didn't actually earn. You were living on borrowed elegance. Helen's champagne flute slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. No one moved to clean it up. "Now," Maverick continued, and his voice took on the crisp, businesslike tone I'd only heard him use during the rare phone calls he couldn't avoid. "As chairman and majority owner of Ironwood Holdings, I am formally notifying you, Reed Foster, that I am exercising my right of non-renewal as outlined in Section 12, Paragraph 3 of your lease agreement. Your current lease expires on the 30th of next month. You have exactly 30 days to secure alternative housing that aligns with your actual budget. The property repossession process will proceed according to Connecticut state law and the terms of your contract." "Maverick, please," Reed's voice broke. "You can't just—" "I'm not evicting you," Maverick said, and there was almost kindness in his voice now. "That would be cruel and unnecessary. I'm simply declining to renew your lease at the end of its natural term, which is my legal right as the property owner. 30 days is more than sufficient time to find appropriate housing. I'd suggest looking at the developments off Route 7. Nice places, good schools nearby, much more aligned with your actual income bracket." He slipped his phone back into his pocket, those same khaki pockets Helen had mocked earlier for being tragically suburban, and reached for my hand. "As for the question of whose house this is," he said, glancing at Helen with something that might have been pity, "I think we've established that definitively. But don't worry, you have 30 days to enjoy it. I'd suggest you make the most of them." The crowd parted as we moved toward the door, everyone suddenly very interested in their shoes or their drinks or anything other than meeting our eyes.
I could feel their stares on our backs, could practically hear the mental recalculations happening as they reassessed everything they'd assumed about the quiet couple in the practical clothes. At the door, Reed caught up to us, his face streaked with tears. "Maverick, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know you were—" Maverick paused, turning back. His hand came up to rest on Reed's shoulder, not unkindly, but firm. "I know you didn't. That was intentional. But Reed, you need to understand something. Your value as a person has nothing to do with this address or that car or any of it. When you figure out where your true worth lies, when you can see it in yourself without needing these expensive props to prove it, then we'll talk, really talk. But until then—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The cool night air hit my face as we stepped outside, and I drew in a deep breath that felt like the first real breath I'd taken in hours. Behind us, the mansion glowed with warm light, but the warmth was deceptive. I could still feel the chill of judgment that had permeated every corner. Willa's hand squeezed mine as we walked toward the car. "Mama, are we leaving without saying goodbye?" "Sometimes," I told her, "the best goodbye is just walking away with your head held high." Jude was practically bouncing on his toes, his earlier misery forgotten in the excitement of the dramatic exit. "Dad was so cool. Did you see Aunt Helen's face? She looked like she swallowed a lemon." "Jude," I said, but there was no real reproach in my voice. Maverick unlocked the car, our practical 7-year-old Subaru with the dent in the rear bumper from when I'd misjudged the garage wall, and we all climbed in. As he started the engine, I glanced back at the mansion one last time. Through the tall windows, I could see figures moving, gathering, no doubt dissecting everything that had just happened. Reed stood on the front steps, Helen nowhere to be seen. "I almost feel bad for him," I murmured. "Don't," Maverick said, pulling out of the circular driveway. "This is the kindest thing I could do for him. He's been living in a fantasy, and fantasies always end. Better to end it now, on our terms, than to let him crash even harder down the line." We drove in silence for a few minutes, leaving Riverside's manicured perfection behind us. Then Willa's small voice piped up from the back seat. "Daddy, are we richer than Miss Helen?" I twisted in my seat to look at her. In the passing streetlights, her face was thoughtful, not proud or gloating, just trying to understand. "Why didn't you say so earlier?" she continued, "when she was being mean about our clothes?" Maverick caught her eye in the rearview mirror, and I saw that gentle smile I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. "That's a good question, sweetheart. And here's the thing. Being rich isn't about showing off or making sure everyone knows how much money you have. It's definitely not about yelling at waiters or making people feel small." He paused at a red light, taking the moment to turn around and look at both kids. "True wealth, real wealth, is having the power to protect your family and set things right without needing to raise your voice. It's being secure enough in who you are that you don't need everyone else's approval." Today, I taught Miss Helen a lesson in respect, something all her money and designer clothes can never buy her. "But she was so mean to you," Willa said, her voice small. "She called your jacket tragic." "She did," Maverick agreed, facing forward as the light turned green. "And you know what? It is a 10-year-old jacket from LL Bean. The elbow patches are wearing thin, and it's probably not what anyone would call fashionable. But it's comfortable, it keeps me warm, and it reminds me of who I really am under all the business suits and board meetings. Sometimes the most expensive thing you can wear is authenticity." Jude, who'd been unusually quiet, suddenly asked, "What's going to happen to Uncle Reed and Aunt Helen?" I considered the question carefully. They're going to have to learn to stand on their own 2 feet, to build a life based on what they actually have, not on what they're pretending to have. "Will Uncle Reed be okay?" Willa asked. "Eventually," I said, and I believed it. Your uncle is smart and capable when he's not trying so hard to impress people. This might be the wake-up call he needs. As for Helen, I trailed off, uncertain. "She made her choices," Maverick finished quietly. "We all do. And then we live with them." The lights of Riverside faded behind us, giving way to darker roads, older trees, the authentic Connecticut that existed beyond the manufactured perfection of new money enclaves. Our headlights carved a path through the gathering darkness, leading us home, not to a mansion that required a trust fund to maintain, but to our farmhouse in Vermont, with its creaky floors and drafty windows, and a darn garden with actual vegetables. Willa yawned, her head drooping against Jude's shoulder. In the rearview mirror, I watched my children settle into the comfortable silence of a car ride home, the drama already fading from their minds. They'd remember this night, I knew they would, but not as trauma, as a lesson. Maverick's hand found mine across the center console, his calloused writer's fingers intertwining with my own. We didn't need to say anything. We'd weathered the storm together, protected our children, and walked away with our dignity intact. We hadn't won because we had more money. We'd won because we knew who we were, and no amount of judgment from people living beyond their means could change that. The car carried us forward into the peaceful night, leaving behind the glittering facade of borrowed elegance, heading towards something real.